It's the Joe Show. Hello and welcome to the Joe Show with me, Joe. Joe Show! As you know, this is the show where I live read an article with you. I comment on it. We all learn something. This one is coming from the New York Times, though, I mean, this is pretty much everywhere. It was written for the New York Times by Maria Kramer. Joe Rogan strikes an exclusive multi-year deal with Spotify. Joe Rogan, if you're not familiar with Joe Rogan, which I'm surprised, how would you not be? He is the most successful and biggest podcaster on the planet. So he runs a podcast called The Joe Rogan Experience, where he has long-form interviews with guests, ranging from, he has everybody on his show. He pretty much tries to hear from both sides of the political aisle, from both sides of the sanity aisle, from both sides of everything. So he'll have someone on from the left, from the right. He'll have someone on from conspiracy, from non-conspiracy. He tries to really talk with everybody, business leaders, thought leaders, everyone. He himself engages in some conspiracy theories, but he's very anti-mainstream media. So he says what he feels. He's not controlled by any conglomerate. So he's very popular with listeners. And Spotify, if you don't know, Spotify is a music streaming service that has a premium model. So with the free model, you get advertisements. And with the premium model, you get no advertisements. I totally forgot they even run ads on Spotify because I've been a premium subscriber for so long. And just last year, they started slowly getting into the podcast game. So they bought a company called Gimlet Media, which ran these documentary-style investigative podcasts. Again, long-form content. They bought another podcast network, which was I think a sports podcasting network. And now they just bought or signed a deal with Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan, brash comedian, turned into a highly popular podcast host. Mr. Rogan announced the deal on Instagram, telling his 9.5 million followers that the podcast would move to Spotify on September 1st in an agreement that further cements Spotify's evolution from a music streaming service to a behemoth purveyor of all kinds of online audio. The company did not disclose the financial details of the agreement to license the podcast, but the Wall Street cites an anonymous source reported that the deal could be worth more than $100 million based on the podcast's performance and metrics. Spokesperson for Spotify declined to comment on the figure cited by the newspaper. Mr. Rogan stressed repeatedly on social media that the deal would not change the nature of his show or make him an employee of Spotify. They want him to continue doing it the way that he's been doing it. It's just a licensing deal, so Spotify won't have any creative control over the show. It will be the exact same show. We're going to be working with the same crew, doing the same show. The agreement was the latest in a string of deals announced by Spotify, which earlier in the year bought The Ringer, a website and podcast network started by Bill Simmons, which has more than 30 podcasts, including the Bill Simmons podcast. The deal with Mr. Rogan is comparable to the kind of struck between athletic brands and sports stars, says Stephanie Liu, an analyst. This is part of Spotify's bigger bet on podcasts. Spotify is buying not only Joe Rogan's extensive and future content library, but also his loyal audience. The deal gives Spotify the opportunity to profit from Mr. Rogan's enormous audience by giving another lure to advertisers, or better yet, convert them into Spotify premium subscribers. In a statement about the deal with Mr. Rogan, the company said his podcast was already the most searched for podcast on Spotify and is the leading show on practically every other podcasting platform. So, with this partnership with the Joe Rogan Experience, it's clear that Spotify is making a bigger and bigger effort to get more podcasts on their platform. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. One, podcasts are longer form content, up to 3 hours, little as 5 minutes, but generally range 20 minutes to the 40 minutes range. I'm a big podcast consumer.
Probably a podcast.
Music, on the other hand, is shorter. It generally go up to 5 minutes, but live in the average of a 3 to 4 minute range. In the constant battle between YouTube, network television, Netflix, Spotify, you're competing for attention. It's an attention economy. Getting someone's attention is as good as data.
It's gold.
And so Spotify making a bigger bet on podcasts is very interesting because they're getting people on their platform for longer
And longer.
which is good for a couple reasons. They can serve them more advertisements if they're not a
premium subscriber.
It's highly likely that they'll buy a premium membership so that they don't have to listen to the ads over and over and over again.
I will say one other thing about podcasts.
There's always been a lot of complaints around the podcast world that it's hard to find new podcasts. You have to really dig for them. If you're on Spotify, they have a fairly good suggestion algorithm. It
Could be better.
But so this is a way for people to go to one platform that's already known for audio to start discovering podcasts. It also makes it easier for me to share podcasts with people. Right now, if I share it with them and they don't have Castbox or they don't have the podcast app on iTunes or
the hundreds of different podcast apps out there,
it's harder for them to listen to that content. So now with Spotify, me sharing podcasts also becomes easier. And then there's one other interesting aspect that I haven't seen anyone talk about it. Currently, advertising on podcasts sucks. For the advertisers, they don't know who's listening.
they have no metrics.
They have no anything. Spotify is starting to slowly build this over time. I think this is a long-term play. We'll be able to have the
Buying power
to make a better platform for advertisers. Or additionally, if I'm listening to a podcast right now and they're advertising something like a Casper mattress, they're like,
Go to Casper.com/Joe Rogan Experience.
so I have to remember when I want to buy a mattress to go to Casper.com/
Joe Rogan Experience.
or when I check out, put in.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
But if I'm a consumer of lots and lots of different podcasts, by the time I get to Casper to buy something, I don't remember which podcast's code works for Casper. I don't remember if Joe Rogan was talking about it. I don't know if Hello from the Magic Tavern mentioned it. I heard it on Recode Decode. I don't know where I heard the coupon code. So I don't know what to put in, and I end up not supporting the podcast by using their coupon code. So there's no great way to, when you hear an advertisement, interact with it. But if Spotify starts putting
more energy behind it,
they already have people there. If, for example, Joe Rogan has a deal with, again, Casper mattresses, and he starts talking about Casper on his show, it's very easy for them to all of a sudden send you a push notification at that point in the podcast that says, hey, 10% off Casper from the Joe Rogan Experience if you click here.
boom.
Click it, you go to the website, you can buy your mattress. No one's really done that. I think it's a very interesting opportunity for somebody to exploit. I think Spotify is making a long-term bet on this type of user interaction with audio and then pushing advertisements based on where you are at in the podcast when it's mentioned. I think that they're going to start doing it with audio. I would
Guarantee it.
especially if they're getting longer form listens of up to 20 to 40 to 3 hours. They're going to want to be pushing you advertisements and information because they have your attention, and that is the most important thing in this attention economy. So that has been the Joe Show with me, Joe. If you like my content, hit subscribe below. I do this daily. You can also follow me on Instagram, a Joe Show, or send articles you want me to cover or news stories to hijoeshow@gmail.com. Otherwise, till tomorrow, read something interesting. This has been The Joe Show.